Yes, folks, it looks like Mark Taylor, aka the Bumbling Jihadi, is on his way back to New Zealand. But first, we all heard the exciting news yesterday about the Brexit deal, which in fact isn't a Brexit deal at all. Now, after listening to Nigel Farage this morning, it's just more of the same. He said it's better than Theresa May's deal, but not much better. Anyway, back to today's story. Now, I'll start this off with a clip from an old video I did about Mark Taylor a while back.
He's offered something of an apology.
I'm sorry for causing too much trouble and being a bit hot-headed and flamboyant in my approach. I don't know if I can go back to New Zealand.
So can he? We made very clear travel advice was do not travel to Syria because if you do, we cannot help you return.
Oh, she's so tough, isn't she?
Yes, she was tough back then, but now to the truth.
A new law to crack down on high-risk New Zealanders involved in terrorism has been unveiled by the government.
It would put more restrictions on people like Kiwi jihadi Mark Taylor, who's trying to get home to New Zealand after leaving to join ISIS. Here's political editor Jacinda Ardern.
Last month, New Zealander Mark Taylor talked to TVNZ from a Syrian jail.
I don't want to be a problem maker. I just want to come home.
And it's a possibility for the man who was nicknamed the Bumbling Jihadi.
This guy's not safe. Look, he might be a bumbling idiot, but he has gone there to fight, to participate in and support extremist activity.
So the government's pushing to bolster our terrorism laws to deal with high-risk people who make it back to New Zealand, even if there's not enough evidence from conflict zones like Syria to make a prosecution. The changes would mean police could impose controls and restrictions, things like being detained and wearing an ankle bracelet.
It's pretty clear that things are changing rapidly in Syria, so I'm very keen to get these in place as soon as I can.
Yes, so it's clear from that Mark Taylor is on his way back.
Nightmare scenario would be that that person comes back, we haven't got the right legislative framework, and that person might, under our laws, be entitled to walk free.
But the Greens have human rights concerns and say no.
Well, of course they'd say no. They will now superglue themselves to roads in protest.
We know that it will rile up fear and anxiety about something that isn't a problem. We have terror law, we have policing mechanisms, let's rely on those.
But National's in.
Ultimately, if it's the human rights of Mark Taylor versus keeping millions of New Zealanders safe, I take the safety of New Zealanders.
But not so fast. National will only support the first stage. It's calling for the law to go further. For example, it wants the restrictions to apply to anyone aged 14 years or older. But at 14, these are children.
Regrettably, children, young people have been radicalised as close as across the ditch.
Oh, he's much tougher. He's from the responsible government. He wants the age limit to include 14-year-olds. I'll vote for him.
In Australia.
I don't know who that would apply to. Mark Taylor is well over 18 years of age. Some of the other New Zealanders we know who are there, who are under 18, are actually children.
The minister says, including Mark Taylor, there could be 5 New Zealanders in Syria, but it's not clear if they're all still alive. Jessica Mackay, One News.
Anyway, now for some more absurdity happening in New Zealand and across the ditch.
Kiwis overwhelmingly support legalising pill testing at music festivals, according to the latest One News Colmar Brunton poll. And while New Zealand First continues to block moves by the police minister, Stuart Nash reveals he's looking into another option to get testing in place by summer. Here's political reporter Benedict Collins.
3 partygoers were left in critical condition after taking drugs at this event in Auckland earlier this month, reigniting calls to get legal pill testing in place.
Young people do these things. Let's not bury our head in the sand. We need to keep them safe.
What an absurd thing to say. That's like saying we know people drink and drive, so let's accept it.
This is a measure that will keep our young people feel safe.
And the public agrees. In the latest One News Colmar Brunton poll, we asked if festival goers should be able to have their illicit drugs legally tested. 75% said yes, 19% said no.
I don't believe one word of that 75% yes stuff. That's nonsense.
And the rest didn't know. Those who believe pill testing saves lives, impressed with that result.
People are answering the poll of putting politics aside, putting themselves in the shoes of either the young New Zealanders who are using drugs or of their parents.
While the police minister can't get enough support at Parliament to change the law, he's told One News he's looking at another option to get it in place for the summer festival season. He's looking to copy what was done in the United Kingdom, where scientific pill testing trials were carried out and the results used to change the law.
You'd have an MOU between police and health and festival goers and other agencies to say, OK, this isn't a bad way forward.
But Winston Peters had this message for people who think pill testing is common sense.
What I'd say to them is that you're being seriously misinformed by the media for a start. We think this is a simplistic matter. It's not. What happens when the pills are regarded as dangerous and unsafe is that
you throw them in a glass of bleach.
Oh, beg your pardon? No, that's not the requirement at all.
And my experience in this House is that a lot of politicians are far behind the general public in terms of common sense.
And she's right. She's talking about herself.
The poll showed most national voters are in favour of pill testing, although the National Party continues to oppose it.
None of us wants to see any young person coming to harm, but I think the message needs to be simpler than that, and it needs to be don't take these drugs at all.
The police minister saying he's not giving up on changing the law. Benedict Collins, One News.
It's also a huge issue in Australia, where a leaked report shows the New South Wales coroner recommending the introduction of pill testing. It follows a spate of deaths from bad drugs at music festivals last summer. The report also calls for the banning of sniffer dogs at festivals and decriminalisation of drugs for personal use.
Now wouldn't it be better to have the police with their sniffer dogs taking the drugs off the kids outside before they get inside? Yes, so of course they're not going to take the drugs off the kids. They obviously don't want to. You heard them. They want to decriminalise drugs, and they weren't talking about marijuana. They were talking about addictive hard drugs. So it is clear to me hard drugs are on the agenda after marijuana is legalised. Yes, keep the populace dumb.